Okay, hello, welcome everyone to What's New in Cyprus. My name is Emily. I'm the Community Events Manager here at Cypress. I am joined by some of my absolutely fantastic colleagues to talk to you about what is new here at Cypress. We are looking forward to having you all here today. Feel free to say hello in the chat. I will now open up the Q&A. So if you do have questions about anything in today's session, please feel free to drop them there. We will do our best to get to every question we can. If we don't get to your question, please join us on Discord. The link will be at the end that you can join us there. We will also be able to share out the Q&A after the event too. This event is being recorded, and this will be shared out with all registrants within the next 24 to 48 hours. So make sure you check back, and you can always check back on this recording. I think those are all kind of like the housekeeping things. I will be in the chat answering as many questions as possible, and I will also be joined by Kevin, who will be answering some questions. But for now, I'm going to turn it over to my fabulous coworker, absolutely iconic engineer, Eli Lucas, to tell you more about what we're talking about today. And Eli, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Emily. And to everybody who's joining us today, thank you for coming. We're extremely excited to have you here today and to be sharing with you of what's been going on in Cypress the past couple of releases. We've had so much coming out that we just couldn't dedicate like a whole webinar to like a particular feature or anything like that. And so this one, we decided to bring in some of our engineers from the Cypress app team who actually work on the app to come and talk about what they've been working on. So it's pretty cool. So this is our panel of people today. We've got Emily, who you all just met. And I think I'll just kind of like let everybody chime in and do their own little introduction here. So I'll start. I am Eli Lucas. I'm the head of developer ecosystem here at Cypress. Kevin?
Couldn't find the unmute button. Hello, I'm Kevin Shui. I'm a customer success manager here. Spend all my time doing enablement and training in Cyprus. So glad to be here. I'm going to be answering questions in the chat. And I will pass it over to Zach Williams.
Hey, everyone. Zach Williams. I am on the component testing team for Cypress. So I mainly focus on our new component testing product. Stoked to be here. Zach Bloomquist.
Hi, everyone. I'm the other Zach. I'm based out of Atlanta, developer on the Cypress app team. If you're in the Cypress app repo, you might know me better as Flotwig. So glad to be here today.
Awesome. And Lachlan is another engineer on our team, but unfortunately he could not make it today, but he recorded a video of what he's going to be presenting. So we'll get to see that as well. Here's our agenda today. So we're first going to cover some of the most latest updates as of yesterday and some news. And then we're going to go into demos around Cypress Studio, the new WebKit support, and the new Svelte Component Testing. So Cypress is an engine, and it just does not stop. We are constantly releasing new features, bug fixes, and whatnot. And when we put this webinar together, just yesterday, we had a whole brand new drop of a feature release for Cypress, and that is in Cypress 10.9. We don't have any demos of the stuff that's in Cypress 10.9, but I did want to cover it real quick. First of all, what I think is probably one of the coolest features is that we now have better error messaging around errors that happen inside of component testing. We've had this for a while in end-to-end testing, where you'll get a thing pop up called a code frame that actually shows you where in the code that the error happened. And to kind of see what this looks like, right now, this is what you'll see in Cypress 10.8 or earlier if an error happens inside of your application. Unfortunately, it's not all that useful. You get a little bit of a stack trace, you get the error message that might have happened or whatnot. But now in Cypress 10.9, you get this new window in the command log that we call a code frame. And this shows you exactly where the error happened, the name of the file, the line number, and whatnot, where it happens. Not only that, but you could actually click on the link to the text to the file here, and it will open up your IDE for you and take you directly to it. This just gives you a lot more insight and a lot better workflow. Like if you do run into an area, you can click on it and get to it. Along with that, we also have some various site.origin, site.session enhancements to go along as we approach GA for those features, which should be coming out within the next few months. As always, if you're interested in seeing like what's the latest in Cypress, you can visit our changelog in the docs. Another thing that I wanted to talk about is we're making a big effort to be a little bit more transparent about what's going on with the features that we're working on inside of Cypress. And so to go along with that, we have a blog post, which is linked down below. It's kind of a long link, but if you just go to the Cypress blog, I think it's in the top 1 or 2 articles that you can go to right there. But the gist of it is that we now have a few different GitHub project boards that you can take a look at for upcoming big features that we're currently working on or thinking about planning for Cypress, as well as how we're triaging new issues that are coming in. So there's 2 different boards there. You can go there and see all the stuff that is going on. Okay, and with that, I am going to play the video from Lachlan and he is going to demo Cypress Studio. Now, if you're familiar with Cypress Studio before, it was kind of an experimental feature that we always had, but when we released V10, we didn't include Cypress Studio in V10, mainly because V10 was a rewrite from the ground up of the UI of Cypress, and we just didn't have time to get it in. But we heard tons and tons of community feedback that they really missed Studio, and then a recent update, we brought Cypress Studio back. Let me go ahead and share this video. Someone give me a thumbs up if you can see the video. Awesome. Okay, here we go.
Hey everyone, my name is Lachlan and I work at Cypress on the Cypress app team building new features for Cypress. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my favorite features, which is called Cypress Studio. This is still experimental, but I've been using it for quite a while now and I find it really useful, and I'm going to tell you all about it today. Basically, Cypress Studio is a way to automatically generate Cypress tests without actually writing any code. So it can be a really good way to get a lot of coverage really quickly. I'm going to show you how it works and then tell you a little bit about how I like to use Cypress Studio. The first thing you need to do is opt into the new feature. Inside of your Cypress config under E2E, just mark Experimental Studio as true, and that's going to enable the feature. For this demo, I'm going to be using the Cypress real-world app. I've already got that one running here. It's just a very simple payment application we like to use to demo new features. Just to save a little bit of time, I prepared a very basic test. And the test we're going to be writing is the create new transaction test. So we're going to write a test verifying that we can correctly send someone some money. I've also put a before each here just to make the test a little bit more concise. We're going to go ahead and seed a new database, and then we're going to log into our user. And from there, we're going to use Cypress Studio to drive the rest of the test. So let's go ahead and do that. Because I've enabled the new Cypress Studio feature, if I come over here to the command log, I'm actually going to get this little icon that says add commands to test. If I go ahead and select this, we're going to enter Cypress Studio mode, and it's going to let me drive my test using Cypress Studio. You can see it's currently activated Cypress Studio, and over here on the left, it says Studio commands. Interact with your site to add test commands. It's exactly what I am going to do. I'm going to go ahead and send one of my users some money. So what I'm going to do is first click on new, that's part of the test. Now I'm going to search for a specific user. In this case, I'm going to search for Devin Becker. I'm going to select Devin Becker, and the next thing we're going to do is send him some money just to congratulate him on a job well done. I'm going to give him $5,000. Finally, let's go ahead and pay him. And the final part of this test is going to be verifying the correct payment message was displayed on the screen. What I can do with Cypress Studio is right click, and it's going to give me this little menu, and I'm just going to assert that element has the following text: paid $5,000 for a great job. Finally, I'm happy with my test, so I'm going to head over here and hit Save Commands. And this is basically going to persist all of the commands I just interacted with into my test file. It then replayed the test and made sure everything is passing, which it is. Let's go ahead and check out the test that was generated by Cypress Studio. So you can see it's generated all of this code here. It's basically going to use the most concise possible selector, things like data test, or it's going to use the ID selector to automate all of the commands. We can see sometimes the selectors are not always going to be ideal. This one is fairly long and brittle, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But first, I'd like to cover why I like to use Cypress Studio and some of its strengths and weaknesses. I would say the primary strength and the place that I've found Cypress Studio most useful is when I'm introducing Cypress to a brand new code base, usually one that hasn't got very much coverage. This is definitely the fastest way to write tests, and I like to use Cypress Studio just to cover the main use cases in a new application, just to give myself a bit of confidence before I start writing new code or start doing refactors. If I notice these kind of large selectors, I'll usually make a small refactor just to make them a bit more concise. I do find these large selectors to be a little bit brittle, and that can be a good way to improve your Cypress Studio tests. Either way, this is a really good way, especially when introducing Cypress to new code bases that maybe haven't got the most test coverage. You don't even need to really know how Cypress works. You just need to go through the user journey, and we're going to generate the rest of the code for you. So that's probably my favorite way to use Cypress Studio. At this point, I'll pause and take any questions or comments you might have about Cypress Studio.
Just joking. We'll see. If you do have any questions, please fill them out in the Q&A, and we will take them there at the end. But once again, really appreciative, Lachlan. Even though he couldn't be here for recording a video to show us Cypress Studio today. And with that, I will hand it over to Zach Bloomquist to see WebKit support.
Yep. Hi, everyone. Today, I'm going to show off a demo of the new experimental WebKit support feature. With this new feature, you can run your same old Cypress tests within the WebKit browser, which, if you didn't already know, is the browser engine which Safari uses. This can give you some confidence that your tests are covering Safari users, which is important because they're like 1/5 of the internet users. So let me get my screen on here. Screen one, that sounds right. Yep. Okay. So yeah, I'm going to use the Cypress example kitchen sink project today for this demo, and I already have it cloned and running locally, and I have the latest version of Cypress installed. So the first thing a user needs to do to use WebKit is to actually acquire the WebKit browser. Unlike other browsers where we detect it's installed in your system, you actually have to install this one via npm. And we're using the Playwright WebKit patched WebKit build for this currently. So I'll add that to the project. Okay, and now I can run yarn Cypress open, but I need to also pass in a config option to opt in to the experimental feature. So I'll do that via the command line. So it's experimental WebKit support goes true. And you can also set this in Cypress Config if you wanted to. And we'll launch. Screen sharing kills my CPU, so sorry for the wait. Wow, okay. So I'll go into end-to-end mode, and I can now see that the WebKit browser is available for selection. And when I click launch here, we are now going to be running our tests within WebKit itself. So let's try to run a demo spec right here. And yeah, we're running tests in WebKit. So now we can finally say that Cypress supports all popular browsers, since we have support for all Chrome-based browsers, Firefox, and WebKit. So cross-browser testing is essentially now completely possible within Cypress. And so since this is experimental, I should mention that there are currently several known bugs. We do intend to fix all of these before we promote WebKit to a stable release, but we wanted to go ahead and get this functionality out now. So that's why we're releasing it with bugs and in experimental. You can learn more about the feature and see a list of known issues in the docs. If you go to the Launching Browsers guide, we have a section called WebKit Experimental with more information. Before I wrap up, I want to give a quick thank you to Weyert DeBoer. Weyert made open source contributions to Cypress, which contributed significantly towards this effort. So thank you, Weyert. And also thank you to the Playwright team for their work on making WebKit more automatable. That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Zach. And now to the other Zach.
Okay, let me share my screen, the entire screen. Yep, that's the one I want to share. Can I get a thumbs up? Oh, I think I have Inception for. Okay, this should be, let me minimize Slack. Okay, so I'm going to be demoing Svelte Component Testing. I think Svelte Component Testing is cool, mostly because I think Svelte is pretty cool, but component testing has supported React and Vue for a long time, but it was just React and Vue. But lately, we've started to really expand the coverage of frameworks that we have. So recently, we added Angular. Now we're adding. Now we've added Svelte. Here's the documentation page for it if you want to go check it out on the guides. I'm going to be basically following this. But what I have over here to the right is a pretty simple Svelte application. It's using TypeScript and Vite. And I'm going to be creating a component test for this counter.svelte component. So I don't have Cypress set up yet. I think what's really cool with Cypress and component testing is how easy the setup can be. So I'm going to show you that now. I've launched Cypress. Nothing's configured, so I'm going to go ahead and configure component testing. You'll see that we've auto-detected that you have Svelte and Vite. Screen will tell you what dependencies you need to install. Normally they're all green, you have them installed, so I'm going to continue from here. Couple key files that we just scaffolded is the Cypress config itself. You'll see that we have a component key inside is how the dev server is configured. We're saying that our framework is Svelte and our bundler is Vite. Also, we scaffolded this support file for you. You'll notice that we're importing this mount command from Cypress/Svelte. This is what allows you to mount a Svelte component to the DOM. And then we're registering this mount as a global Cypress command. So anywhere in your test, you can do side out mount rather than having to explicitly import it. Just a convenience, but nice to have. So let's boot Cypress up, choose a browser. And it's going to say, I don't have any tests. That's because we're going to create one. So this is our counter Svelte that we're going to be creating a test for. If you're familiar with Svelte or Vue, this should be similar. We have a script tag where our JavaScript is going to run. We have some HTML elements. Right here is a button, and then we have some styles below. You can see that this component has some local state in the form of a count, and then a button that when we click on it, we're going to increment this count. So it's just going to track the number of clicks that we have done. So I'm going to go ahead and create a counter.sci.ts file. And the very first thing I'm going to do is import our counter component. VS Code tried to help me. I don't want all of that. Just that one there. And you see Cypress recognize it. Our test isn't doing anything, so let's tell it to do something. So very simple. I just want to see that this component renders. And I'm going to use the side.mount and pass the counter component. Now when we save, we get an update, and now you can see our component here. And you can interact with it, totally dynamic. You can go ahead and automate it. So I can hit the button and give it a click. You'll see if I hover over this command, you'll see it switching from 0 to 1. I can then assert against it, should have text clicks 1. Cool, we have a passing test. So we can spice this up a little bit. Say we want to pass some props to this component. Say clicks doesn't start at 0 every time. It can start at whatever we have defined. So we'll do that by passing in some props to the component. So we'll say props, and I want the count to be, say, 42. What I have to do in the component itself is state that I want the count to be a property on this component. Now, once I've updated that, you'll see that the component is rendered with 42. We are clicking on it, which makes it go to 43. If I comment this out, you'll see 42. If I go back, I can add 43, and now we have a passing test. So yeah, component testing, I really like component testing. Rather than rendering a page in its entirety, you get to be almost surgical in how you want to develop your components. So you get to render them in isolation, make sure that they behave exactly how you want. And now we're bringing that support to Svelte. There's a lot more that you can do inside of component tests. Almost all of the features that you're familiar with end to end. If this component, say when I clicked on it, sent a network request, you could intercept that, you could stub it. So there's a lot of power that you can do. This is a very simple example. If you're interested, if you go through this quick start guide at the end, there are some example projects. So Vite and Webpack example projects. You can find that in our Cypress Component Testing apps. So feel free to poke around and give it a try. I'd love to hear some feedback from any of y'all who do give it a try. You can always offer that feedback in the Discord. From me.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Zach. Let me see. I must have clicked on something because it's asking if I want to finish the Q&A. And no. That would be the answer there. All right. Okay, so got a lot of time today for questions, and I know we have a ton of them in there. So that is great. But before we jump into Q&A, I just want to again say thank you for coming today. If you have more questions, please go in there and ask. You can also upvote questions that are in there, and if you upvote them, they're going to rise to the top of the list, and so we'll probably see them sooner. How do we want to do that? Do we want somebody to read off the questions and then people jump in?
Yeah, I'll read off some questions. There are a couple that are similar, so we can sort of, I think, hit them in groups. So there's a couple of these at the top. There's a question about Cypress Studio. The first question is, how does Cypress Studio work with elements with dynamically generated IDs? There are similar questions about how Cypress Studio determines the selector it's looking for, if best practice is to set that selector. So if y'all wouldn't mind talking about Cypress Studio and best practices around element selectors.
Yeah, so there is if you go into the documentation around Cypress Studio, there is a little bit that talks about like how it selects its IDs, and it's based on a certain like preference order. What that is, I don't quite know offhand, but that is documented, and it's going to prefer certain elements over, or certain selector methods over other selector methods. And if you heard Lachlan mention it in the video, he said that sometimes that the way that Cypress Studio might select something might be a bit flaky. And I don't know where an ID selector falls into its order of preference, but if it's like high on the list, that could be a great example of how flakiness can get introduced into it based on the type of selector that's being used. But the great thing about it is that once like you have your code, you can go back through and edit the code that Cypress Studio generates, and you can update the selectors to be better selectors. I know if you're doing things like using like data-test ID or data-sci ID or something like that, that's going to fall high on the preference list. And so that's a recommended way of being able to put something into your code base to be able to select it via Cypress Studio.
Awesome. Thank you. And while we're on the topic of Cypress Studio, a couple of questions around Cypress Studio's limitations. Specifically, somebody explicitly asked, can Cypress Studio be used for testing API calls, just end-to-end testing? So we'd love to hear you talk about both the technical limitations and maybe from a little more strategic perspective, when I want to use Cypress Studio and when it might be more beneficial to use Cypress, whatever not Studio is. I don't know if we've come up with a name for that. Vanilla Cypress.
Yeah, Vanilla Cypress. There you go. I mean, I suppose it depends on how like you're actually making the API requests. Since Cypress Studio is pretty much like a recorder, it's going to record your actions inside of a website. You would have to kick something off to make an API request through the website. If you just wanted to have a coded API test, like you want to use Cypress Studio for that, you would just do that directly inside of a code file. Yeah, was it? I felt like that there was two parts of the question, but I don't know the other.
Yeah,
part.
just I think if you have some thoughts on speaking to like when an organization or a team might use Cypress Studio versus when their testing strategy might be better suited to Vanilla Cypress.
Mm-hmm. It's going to, so a lot of it's probably going to depend on the capabilities of your team. If you have a QA team that consisting of people who aren't necessarily coders, Cypress Studio is really going to help them out because it's going to be able to generate those tests for them. If your tests are generated by like other developers or software engineers and test or anybody like that, you might prefer to go the code-based approach. A code-based approach, you're generally going to get better quality tests to come out of it, more, and you'll probably be able to have more reusability and custom commands and stuff like that. But they do take longer to write. So that's like one of the advantages. If you needed to get code coverage over your site pretty quickly, you can start with Cypress Studio and then you have the luxury of editing the tests that Studio generates.
Yeah, I think it's worth noting too, this is listed in our documentation page. There are some commands that are not currently supported in Cypress Studio. So if you're curious about that, go check out the documentation. Eli, that's a great idea of like starting in Cypress Studio and then editing it out. That's I hadn't considered that before. I like that. Great. I am going to move on to move off of Cypress Studio for a little bit. Rosemary asked, will Cypress 10.9 be more compatible with other programming languages like TypeScript? A couple of questions around, are we looking to support other languages in Cypress anytime soon? Other browsers? What's next in terms of that? Is there anything we can speak to?
What was the language that she brought up?
Rosemary specifically asked if 10.9 will be more compatible with other programming languages, for example, TypeScript.
Okay, so I mean, TypeScript is already currently supported in Cypress, has been for the past several major versions. So we do have a guide inside the docs on how to get up and running with TypeScript, and so I would say go and look there if you're having any type of issues getting Cypress up and running with TypeScript. But as far as other non-JavaScript based languages, the answer is no. That's not currently in our thoughts or roadmaps of supporting other languages like Java or .NET or Ruby or anything along those lines. When we started Cypress, we kind of made the bet on building a test recorder using web-based technologies. And that's paid off pretty good for us, but we do know not everybody does it. So if that's something you're super, super interested in, I would say hop over to our GitHub and see if you can find an existing issue for that or open up a new one. And if we start to get a lot of momentum around that, we might look at it in the future. Not making any promises, but we're always looking at improving the product. So.
Awesome. Thank you. Let's see. I'm just finishing up answering a question here. And this is a great question. Nash is asking about the collapse all directories in the Cypress app. Is anybody up on that feature coming back in the application?
Anybody else know? I'm not actually too familiar with that.
I know it was something we had discussed, and I'm gonna get in trouble for talking about this. Is likely coming back if it hasn't already, but I'm not sure if it went out in 2.9 or not.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
sorry, 10.9 rather.
Cool.
Nash, we'll get back to you on that. We'll get you a good, clean answer a little later.
Is there a GitHub issue on that one?
Is there a GitHub issue on that one?
Yeah, I can't. I'm not finding one, so maybe there should be one. If this is something people are missing.
If there isn't one, we will make sure it gets in there. So we'll just follow up on that. So we're not. We'll move on to some other questions that we can't answer in the meantime. So. Yeah, we have a couple of questions around component testing in beta. So I want to hit some of those component testing questions. We have a question: when will there be Cypress component testing in the release version and not in beta? When will it not? Are we looking to move that out of experimental anytime in the near future?
One of the Zachs, you want to take that?
I can. I can't give a specific date as to when it will be moved out of beta. Our hopes is by the end of this year, it'll be considered stable. So yeah, look forward to that.
And I can say that the component testing team is currently focused all the way on bringing component testing into GA. So they're actively working on it. They just got some things that need to be cleaned up and well-defined and documented, and those are the types of things that are happening.
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Excellent. Cool. I will say we have several questions in the chat that are not necessarily specific to the content that was covered on this webinar. I'm happy to sort of hit those, but if you've got a couple of people who are very knowledgeable, particularly on the subjects that were asked here. So if you have additional questions around any of the content, now would be a great time to put in that. And if everybody's cool, we can start jumping into other questions. Does that sound good? Mm-hmm. Great. So this is hang on. I'm sorry, my questions just got moved around. This is a strategy question, sort of best practice experience here. Running end-to-end and component tests, and specifically running them in the same time in a CI environment. Lauren says that read that running both ETE and component tests at the same time in CI is not best practice. Curious to hear from y'all regarding this. Any experiences with this? Any thoughts on performance best practice here?
I'm not too sure why it would not be considered a bad practice. So you either have to run one or the other when you're running tests in CI. You can't run both component tests and end-to-end tests via the same command. They have to be started up separately. So that would mean that you're running them in parallel to each other, two different commands running at the same time. And I would think that would be a good way to go. Does anybody else know of any other reasons not to do that?
Yeah, I would. If you're executing the tests in separate containers on CI in parallel, then you should be good. Running them both on the same machine would probably be problematic. One would be resource intensive, so you might see some issues there. But yeah, I don't see anything wrong. If you parallelize them, makes sense to run them and reduce the amount of time it takes CI to run on your tests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if you have any more context around that, like where you saw it was a bad practice or where you think it was bad practice, let us know.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that either. So I'd love to see that and investigate. So thank you. Great. We have a couple of questions around using Jest with Cypress, or whether we should be using Jest with Cypress. One of the questions is to Jest or not to Jest with Cypress, and the follow-up question is any advice for choosing between or balancing a combo of Jest component tests versus Cypress component tests.
This is not a joking matter, so let's not jest. No, Jest is still a valuable part of your testing tool chain, because if you're doing any type of unit testing of node applications, you're still going to want to do that. Cypress only tests in the browser; it doesn't test in on the server side. And so, if you're using Jest for your node-based applications, it's still good to go. As far as if you're using Jest to power other component testing libraries like a React testing library or something like that, we don't necessarily recommend going in and replacing all that all at once. You can run both Cypress component tests and Jest component tests side by side. You might run into a few issues with like TypeScript typings or whatnot getting in the way. We do have a few guides in the documentation about how to get around that. But yeah, I would say, you know, if you do have a big suite of Jest tests with React testing library and you bring Cypress in, I would say, like, you know, choose one and go with it, because having two testing libraries it's just adding another tool to the chain. And so if your idea is to like eventually migrate over, I would say start working on that and then eventually phase the other one out. But yeah, there's really no downsides or anything like that to having them both there.
Awesome. Thank you. Quick question on component testing. Edward asks, is the documentation about React components up to date? And I believe that is the case. Our Cypress documentation and how it relates to React in component testing is currently up to date. Does somebody know something that I don't that would suggest otherwise?
No, as far as I know, it is. If you know of any specific issues around that, please file an issue on the documentation repo.
Great, thank you. This is sort of a follow-up to earlier. Vlad was asking about the experimental flag, specifically with Sci origin. Are we planning to make it part of the standard library? Is there a better way to answer this question? Is, do we currently have a user-facing place where users can go and check in on their favorite features about whether or not this is a feature is being released, is moving to general release, anything like that?
Yeah, and this is kind of what I alluded to earlier about our community transparency updates. If you go to this blog post, you can find links to these project boards where we list all these features like cross-origin testing, sci.origin, sci.session, and like where they're currently at in the phase. There's right now they're both currently in the experimental status, and that's just because we're still working out some thoughts and processes around the API and DX and how they work and what that kind of stuff. But I can let you know that those are both moving towards GA availability, hopefully within the next few months. But yeah, this project board is exactly for that, is where you can go and see like what all of our initiatives are and how they currently sit in the different phases.
So if you're wondering if anything is going to get moved from experimental to GA, this is a great place to take a look and get the most up-to-date information that we can share. Mm-hmm. Great. We have a question here. I want to know what the team's ambitions are regarding mobile app testing. Is there a vision or roadmap? Anything that we can share at this time?
I think it depends on what you mean by mobile app testing. If you're talking about like testing like a progressive web app inside of a browser, yes, and especially with our Safari support now, you can get pretty good confidence in your tests that you're able to support mobile Safari and Chrome on Android and those other kinds of applications. If you're looking at testing like a hybrid application, something built with like Cordova, Capacitor, Ionic, or whatnot, That's currently still not supported, and that's just because of the way that Cypress runs. Cypress runs actually inside of your web application. We get injected into your actual web application, and we don't currently do that on mobile devices.
Excellent. Great question. I'm going to hit one or two more, and then I'm going to do some rapid fire questions because there's a bunch in here that are quick. TJ asks, will Cypress do a good job of recognizing elements that are re-rendered on the page? I've had issues with Cypress being able to find elements on single page applications.
Will Cypress Studio be able to find re-rendered? As soon as the test is going to run, and as long as your selectors will find the new elements, it should be good, I would think.
Great. Excellent question. Great. Cool. Let me see what new has come through here. This is a good question. Sort of follow up on Cypress Studio and when is the best use case. Stephen is asking about the difference between Cypress Studio and the Cypress Recorder extension. Do you want to speak to that, Eli?
Sure. So they're kind of two different tools that we offer that accomplish kind of the same task. They're both about recording users' interactions in the browser and ultimately turning them into tests that can run inside of Cypress. So the Cypress Chrome Recorder was built around the same time that Cypress 10 came out and Studio was no longer available. So while it wasn't initially seen as a replacement for Cypress Studio, it was kind of like, hey, if you really miss Cypress Studio, we also have this other tool that can kind of do the same thing. So there was that, but it was also built because the Chrome team built in the capability of being able to record, and we saw a good opportunity as a company to be able to introduce the Chrome Recorder to take that recording and turning them into Cypress tests. And we thought that if we didn't have this tool there, it would be an obvious missing thing inside of the ecosystem that we needed to fill. And if we weren't going to fill it, then somebody else probably would. So they're both officially supported Cypress tools that we offer. Neither one of them are going away. I will say, like, if choose which one works best for you and your situation.
Excellent. Thanks, Eli. I want to hit this question. Back to component testing versus end-to-end testing. If I'm an organization and I'm building out my tests, I'm trying to determine when the best use case is for component testing versus end-to-end testing, when I should be using those two different kinds of Cypress testing. Any thoughts on where in the development and testing process those two types of testing should fit? What does component testing do best? What does end-to-end testing do best is maybe a better way to ask that question.
Mm-hmm. So I've been doing a lot of talking. Somebody else want to jump in there?
Yeah, I'll chime in. What I find myself doing most with component testing, this might meander a bit, but I found myself developing the components with Cypress. So rather than like thinking of the test as an afterthought, right? Like, okay, I've created this component and now I'm going to write a test for it. Actually using Cypress as a tool to drive your development of that component, right? So you can start off with a component, blank template, and you have these requirements that the component has to do, and one by one, you can change the component, edit the tests, right? And you'll see that component update in isolation, right? And so I find myself, the speed at which I can develop these components and the confidence that I have in them is greatly boosted when I just use Cypress as a development tool itself, rather than, okay, I just need to get tests for this thing. One last thing I'd noticed when I was writing a lot of end-to-end tests, I would try to test this page, and there was always gaps in that page. Like I didn't want to make the tests too long, right? And so there's like, I kind of wish I would have tested that component a little bit more, but like I don't want to focus on it too much. And that's where like component testing can come in. You have this chunk of code, you want to be confident in it. And component testing is, brings a lot of confidence that, if I have all of these modular components and I know that they work, then I'm confident, and I have tests to back it up. I'm confident when I plug them into my application, they're going to work. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of what I see in the wild the most when I'm working with Cypress users is exactly what Zach just said, right? A lot of folks are developing with the component testing part of the application open in their, as a part of their development workflow, and then we'll move to end-to-end testing as it fits into the thing. And I don't know, for me, that's a really useful way to think about the differences there. A lot of our outstanding questions are specific use cases, specific CI/CD integrations, and those might best be served and answered in our Discord server. So if you've got a very specific question around, I see one about Octopus CI/CD with Cypress, it might require some legwork from us to find whatever documentation is available anyways. So I recommend going to our Discord server. I'm going to use that as a segue to send this over to Emily to talk about Discord and anything else that she wants to cover.
Segue, Kevin, truly gorgeous. I loved it.
You always want to call out segues as they happen. You want to say, I'm
yes,
segue.
Of course. It actually makes a great segue if you can say, I'm now segueing to the next person. It really works out beautifully. I love it so much. So yeah, absolutely. If you want to all stay connected with the Cypress community, highly, highly recommend our Discord. You can use that evergreen link. Join us here. You'll actually be able to go in and like see specific like topics, frameworks, ways that you can provide insight to others as well as get feedback from the larger community. Here on this call, we are nearly 5 people that can only do so much to be able to support you, but our Discord has literally thousands of members that can be there for you to help work with you. So we have 75 plus ambassadors that are in there as well that can help give you that support as well. So really, really recommend going there. As far as other community events that we have coming up, check us out on our community events platform. We will have another webinar in a couple of weeks specifically about Cypress Chrome Recorder. I know it was kind of mentioned in the wind here in this webinar today, but it will be able to really dive in deeper to Cypress Chrome Recorder, how to use it, and really get some insight from the people who actually built the tool. So who better to be able to learn from similar today. So that's really all I have from the community side. Eli, was there anything else that you wanted to be able to share from your side, or anything else that you wanted to make sure that we include in today's webinar?
Nope. I just once again like to iterate, thank you for coming today. We're excited to have you, and please hit us up in Discord, hit us up on GitHub if you run into any issues. And yeah, thank you very much.
Yeah, we'll see you there. And for everyone that joined today, look for an email with this recording. It will also be on YouTube. Again, we'll make sure that you have access to all the resources that are here. Follow along with us, and we really appreciate it. And everyone have a great Wednesday or whatever day it is when you're watching this. And we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.